The pilot's always important, and I like how they set up characters. Luffy is shown as the devious little scrumptious little guy that he definitely is. His desire to become king of the pirates is immediately apparent, which is great. There's a lot of limitations to first pilots of most shows where they try to cram in a bunch of stuff at the same time, but I think they managed to do it pretty well here. They only introduced two major characters, Alvida, Luffy, and I guess Kobe. You know, it's also important that they establish the idea of Roronoa Zoro, Nami. I wonder if she's going to become important. You know, it's random ginger probably. And, of course, devil fruits, you know? This is the most basic level where Luffy's just beating up normal people who sometimes have a mace, and it is awesome. I also like the introduction of Kobe in this arc, and overall it's just pretty well paced with a couple of good jokes. It is a solid enough pilot that unfortunately has no sexy green men. 6.5. Luffy and Four Eyes get back to a machine base, where they encounter the evil Captain Morgan with a weird axe hand. They beat up this annoying fucking kid named Helmeppo. Oh yeah, and they talk to Roronoa Zoro. And Luffy, of course, seeing that he's tied up, asks him to join his pirate crew, which he will, maybe, eventually, who knows. That ginger girl is still running around. I don't know if she's important to the main plot or anything, though. Yeah, this episode is, I believe, more solid than the other one. It introduces us to Zoro, which is obviously much better, because Zoro is awesome. Axe-Hand Morgan is on principle better than Alvida. At least, he's somewhat threatening. I really like the part where they beat the shit out of Helmeppo. Flashbacks showing why he wants to be a swordsman in the first place is kind of sweet. I kind of like it. Very good. Better episode than the pilot, because they don't have to deal with all that shit. So I give it a solid 8.4 out of 10. This episode is mainly split into two parts. First part is Luffy and Zoro beating the absolute shit out of Axe-Hand Morgan. If you remember, they were about to execute him, so now since Zoro is technically a criminal, he joins Luffy's crew. So that's nice, because any episode that he's in is better because he's in it. And the second part is the aftermath, after they beat his ass. Means generously allow them to stay alive for a while. So they have to leave town and Kobe, because he wants to be a Marine, remember? I really like their little arc that they go through, with Luffy punching him and him being like, "Oh, I can never stand up for myself, man." And then them waving goodbye. That's just very heckin' wholesome, and I appreciate that. A ginger girl is running around. I wonder if she will become important to the plot. 8 out of 10. Solid little conclusion. So Luffy and Zoro leave the marine base and realize that they have no fucking clue how to navigate. They just kind of meander around for a bit in this episode while Nami introduces us to the buggy pirates. Fun little side plot with these random 3 pirates that have no correlation. I like specifically the parts where Nami tricks them and where Zoro shows where he just beats them up. Smart little contrast, and it's also incredibly funny to me for some reason that Luffy just jumps up and gets stuck in a goddamn bird. I also really like the Shanks plot. It's great. I kind of hate most flashbacks in most episodes, but I just really like Shanks, like 90% of the population. So, you know, I enjoyed it. It is a solid little episode introducing us to Shanks and Buggy. He's also finally directly intervening with the plot, and Luffy, so that's nice too. For the Shanks stuff, I'll give it an 8.3. Nami and Luffy interact for a bit as she considers becoming his navigator. Nami is revealed to be a thief, which, you know, makes sense. It goes with the backgrounds of all the other episodes. There's a couple of nice moments, especially when they finally start fighting Buggy, when Nami uses Luffy as bait to get the map, but then refuses to kill him, giving away her cover. I like how they established that about her moral compass, even if it is a bit skewed, because she just doesn't want to kill in general. Zoro also saves everybody's ass, like normal. And this is one of many segments about the fight. It's basically just, they have a cannon, he's in a cage, Nami is negotiating for a while, Zoro shows up, they reveal that Buggy has a weird power where you can not kill him immediately. And there's some canon shenanigans. There's a couple of really good stuff in here. Like, I really like Buggy and such. But the pacing sucks. The other ones, even if the villains were worse, at least they ended. I just constantly want to put it at 1.5 speed. But everything else was much better. 8.6. This episode kind of sucks, honestly. The entire thing is separated into 2 main parts. One of them is Luffy beating up this random tiger guy. Or no, not tiger, lion. And the other is this recurring storyline about a dog who doesn't want to leave his place. And I am a dog person, and I did like the thing in general, but if half of the episode is okay, and then the other half is not, I'm not gonna like it. The best part was the 2 minutes that Buggy was in the episode. Honestly, I would have just rathered if they just focused more on the Zoro versus Kabaji battle scene that's gonna happen literally in 1 episode, just make it a 2-parter. At least that's somewhat interesting. 5 out of 10. You barely passed. 7. Showing sharp contrast to that relatively mediocre Moji episode, this one is actually really fucking good. On one hand, the fight scenes are awesome. I really like all of Kabaji's flashing moves and how Zoro eventually defeats him with 2 handicaps. That's great. The two other side plots, aka Nami going around and doing some shenanigans, and Buggy and Luffy talking about Shanks and just fighting in general, are also great on an emotional level. I like how they talk about Shanks and how Nami realizes maybe not all pirates are bad, which I forgot to mention is something that they kind of set up in the further episode. It all just culminates in a pretty nice moment, but it does kind of get cut down because we still haven't learned the connection between Buggy and Shanks yet, so I got a docket points for that. But otherwise, this is a phenomenal episode. The best so far, and it's an easy 9. Luffy keeps fighting Buggy, and then after a little back and forth, and Nami helping him a little with some advanced strategies, they managed to beat his ass. So that's pretty fun. We also get the flashback that shows us that Shanks and Buggy were parts of the same crew, and that Shanks accidentally made Buggy eat a devil fruit, so he can't swim anymore. Big sad. And Nami becomes their impromptu navigator for now, which is nice. I like that they also give 5 million berries to the town so that they can repair themselves. I like the poodle guy. It's a pretty solid episode, helped by the fact that I generally just enjoy flashback episodes more than normal ones. Depth! Also, they tease, Long Nose here. 9.3, the best out of Buggy's arc so far. So after beating Buggy in that one village that nobody cares about, Luffy and gang go on an adventure and run into Usopp, who is a massive liar. That's his whole character. They then spend the rest of the episode setting up some plot points for characters that are later to come, like the 3 Usopp pirates, which are just small children, Kaya, who is a sickly rich person, and Calidor, who is a really rich, kind of asshole butler, who is the most obvious twist villain I am sorry that I have ever seen in anything ever. Not even from seeing the show, but like, come on. You're telling me this guy is a good guy? Are you like 4? Yeah, but overall, since it's just kind of setting up things that are going to be interesting later, I kind of don't really like this episode. It's a bit too slow-paced, not much interesting happens. It's still fine. Give it like 6.5. They just haven't really introduced anything yet. Second episode of the Syrup Village arc, and I like it more than the other one. It's got some great emotional beats, like when Usopp is punching Calidor in the face. That's great. I like how they just immediately reveal that he's evil. I think if they'd extended that out, it would have been really annoying. And I'm probably the only one that thinks this, but Django is one of my favorite secondary characters so far. He's so much funner than Moji and Kabaji, and I like his goofy energy, okay? It is a bit tropey, and it kinda doesn't make sense that they don't check to make sure if Luffy is dead or kill Usopp. Like, that is kind of a major plot hole. But at the same time, I don't really care. It also sets up some pretty decent tension. Like, the pirates, they gon' kill peoples. That's tense. I give this episode a solid 8.1. Good but not great. So I've been thinking, why doesn't Calidor just kill her and take her money in the first place? Like, in both scenarios, he's going to kill her and take her money. Why does it matter that she consents to her taking her money first? Why doesn't he just take it and save himself 3 years of his life? Anyway, about the actual episode, it's just Boy Who Cried Wolf for 80% of it, with the worst pacing you've ever seen. Like, I know that people say One Piece has bad pacing, but this was a fucking slog. Calidor isn't even that good of a villain. The only good parts were the last third or so, when it had some pretty good emotional moments with them fighting the pirates in the morning, but they're probably going to drag that out too, so who cares? I think this arc has potential, mainly because I really like Usopp, but compared to Buggy, I'm just straight up not having a good time. 6 out of 10. If there's anything that's genuinely great about this episode, it's the great cold open. I love this part where he's getting Kaya's gift, he then throws it on the ground, kills Mary, and then just fucks off, and then almost kills Kaya. It's great. You're like, wait, does he kind of love her? The answer is no, but like, kinda, you know? There's not much fighting in this episode, but there's some pretty nice oil shenanigans. Luffy proves that devil fruits are OP by taking out like 50 people. And that's kind of it. People were just waiting for the main characters to get ready on the beach so that they could fight for a bit. I'd say it's good, despite not really having that much to stand out. Solid 8. So Django and the Batcat pirates are fighting Luffy and the gang. So they decide to fight for a while, and Django does some hypnosis shenanigans and makes Luffy and everybody else super overpowered. So he beats the crap out of him, rips the weird helm stick thing off of the shit. This is the best part of the episode. The rest is just kind of boring because this part of the arc is awfully paced. It's okay. I'm not even going to talk about those furries that Zoro beats up, just know they're boring as hell. 7.2. Okay, this episode is actually really good. Sharp contrast, I know. Imagine me being positive. Anyway, they finished that useless fight with the brothers that I refuse to learn the name of. There was a great bait and switch. Calidor basically breaks Kaya's heart. It's amazing. Luffy wakes up after being knocked out and going to sleep for like the third time. I recorded this at 3 in the morning, and my notes just say punch. I don't know what the fuck that means, but I said very good, so just take my word for that. So yeah, this episode, it's good, or whatever. On a number, 9 out of 10. Now give me my 1,000,000 followers. This episode is a series of fights that continue between Kuro's pirates and Luffy's. The most important of which is Luffy versus Kuro, which shows devil fruit powers versus natural pussyfoot abilities, I guess. Then there's a whole subplot about Onion Head, Apple, and what's-his-face trying to run away to save Kaya. And Zoro beats the shit out of that brother whose name I still refuse to learn. For having a lot of fights, this episode is actually pretty well paced. They have the fun stuff at the beginning, and then they end it with like a flashback to showing how Kuro beat up an entire legion and then turned himself in. It's pretty fun, and Luffy and Kuro keep scrapping until one of them falls. Not yet, though. You know, Syrup Village is really looking up. I'll give it 9.2. Alright, so Luffers destroys one of Kuro's claws. They keep fighting on the bridge. They have some banter. And Django, more importantly, pursues Kaya. And there's this whole little subplot. Oh, actually, if there's anything important to note about this episode in particular, it is the first Zoro does not know how the fuck to navigate literally anything moment. Keep that in mind, because if he had decent navigation, we would have probably ended 200 episodes ago. Anyway, since I'm a pretty big Django simp, I actually pretty much like this episode and the fight. Got some great dialogue, Luffy tells him he's scum, everything's here. 8.4. This episode is pretty good, honestly. Not only does Luffy finally kick Kuro's ass, which is something I've been waiting for 3 hours worth of episodes, it honestly has a pretty decent conclusion. The fight scene is awesome, if a little cliche, and I really like how they introduce Usopp's mother. Now that the pirates are all gone, Usopp is like, maybe I want to be a pirate. So he says goodbye to the 3 little guys and to Kaya. It's really sweet. And honestly, him leaving to become a pirate with Luffy and the gang, I appreciate it. I like sharpshooters. So yeah, this episode was good. I give it a 9. And that was Syrup Village. If you want to know my rankings for the arc so far, here they are. Time to meet some horny cooks. Absolutely flabbergasted this episode was not filler. It sucks. The gang just goes to a random island and meets a box guy. It's lame, and the 2 twists that they had, I found out almost immediately. Not to mention, he's the only character. He has an okay backstory, but that's it. The rest of it is just boring. So I'm proud to present you as the first and hopefully last bad One Piece episode. 3 out of 10. 90% of this episode is a flashback episode for Zoro. And you know, I like Zoro. He's Big Green Man. Who doesn't love him? And honestly, it's pretty sweet. It just shows him being a swordsman and then Kuina and the bond to become the world's greatest swordsman. If I had to critique it, and it's not really because I do really like flashback episodes, I wish we'd seen his parents, you know, like Usopp and eventually Luffy. I don't know, it's just kind of weird. They mostly focus on Kuina, Zoro, and this weird father character. I don't really like him that much. But otherwise, I think the whole emotional moment with the sword, very good, very good. I'm gonna shock y'all, 9.4. Really like them flashbacks. This episode is split into 2 main parts. The first one is Zoro's previous crew, Johnny and What's-His-Face. There's some meandering chicanery that happens with some cannons and stuff for the first, I'd say like 10 minutes of the episode. It's alright. I don't really love it though. The best part is when they go to Baratier, which is a fish restaurant in the middle of a pirate ocean. And we meet Sanji, who fulfills my desire to watch every food anime ever constructed. On here, but he doesn't really get to shine much. He just kind of beats up an asshole, doesn't eat his food. Which will be explained later. Don't worry. And yeah, Luffy has to pay off a debt. We get introduced to Pegleg whatever. It's fun. Still has to set things up, so it's not perfect. But it's still pretty good. 7.9. We're finally introduced to Jin and Don Krieg pirates. It is one of my favorite secondary characters so far. I love his design, his philosophy, and the ending that they do, signaling that Don Krieg will attack the restaurant. It's great. I also really love the interactions between Sanji and Zeph. They have yet to give him a backstory, which I am hoping they will do soon. But between them now, it's still great. They're comedy gold. Luffy also gets into some shenanigans with the crew when they come to the restaurant again, which I don't understand why they can't take, like, 1% of Nami's 5 million berries and just be like, hey, there you go. Let's leave now. Whatever. So far, this is probably the best I've enjoyed any of these arcs. Standalone, it's solid. It's an 8.6. Introduced to Donald Krieg. Honestly, I probably preferred the Jin sub-story more than this one. I don't know, there's just something not threatening to me about Don Krieg besides his appearance. Like, I know I've said this a couple of times, but Buggy literally has devil fruit powers. Why does it take 3 more villains? Actually, no, Arlong doesn't even have them really either. Why does it take 4 villains to get the next devil fruit user? Whatever. Don Krieg is really my only problem with this entire arc. Everything else is basically perfect. Even if I don't love him, he's still pretty good, and this introduction is honestly pretty great. 8.5, you know what I mean? Not much happens in this episode. The only 2 semi-important things are Donald Krieg getting his men replenished, and there's going to be a big fight, and that'll be sick and stuff, and Mihawk showing up. Oh my heckin' gorsh, I love Mihawk. I know I've been stating that these episodes are like 8s, or like 9s, or even 7s, but like, compared to what they have later, they're probably like 6. Mihawk is a perfect example. Mere existence make this easily the best arc so far. I really love the idea that Zoro's about to fight this guy, though I am a bit concerned on how they're gonna save him. Like, what type of plot armor are they gonna show up? I think it'll be annoying. 8. Give me more fucking Mihawk. Oh my heckin' gorsh, they finally introduced Mihawk. Let's go! He's quite fun, and I really like his interactions between him and Zoro. I mean, he's just such an absolute badass. He's absolutely eclipsing literally every other villain so far. So goddamn overpowered that they can only have him for 1 episode, and this 1 episode is a true masterpiece. Keep in mind, we're at the standard where fucking Don Krieg is arguably the most powerful guy that we've met so far. And we ain't getting a villain as powerful as Mihawk for the next 200 episodes, so I really enjoyed this moment. He's just a fucking badass. What's there more to say? I love the ending, too, with him sparing him and him showing the promise to Luffy. It's very good. 10 out of 10. I really like it. This episode is an extremely mixed bag. On one hand, I like some of the creativity that they do with turning Baratie into this battleground, and they have like a fish animatronic, and Don Krieg does fight. And I do like this side character named Pearl. I think he's enjoyable at least, even if he's extremely unmemorable. But nothing of interest really happens. People, they just kind of kill the goons, is essentially what happens in this one. Like, you know when they were doing Moji and Kabaji in the other arc? It's this version's equivalent. And it's definitely better than that, but I don't think it's still good. I don't know, I think this is just a general problem that I have, that when you set up the main antagonist, I hope that they fight the main antagonist, not their goons for 50 minutes, you know? For a goon fight episode, it's still pretty good. I give it like a 7.9. For all intents and purposes, this is the Sanji backstory episode. And as backstory episodes go, it's very good. Honestly, I probably like it even more than Luffy's, which is really saying something. There's just so many great elements, like him wanting to become a cook, him cutting off his own leg, him discussing the all blue. It's all just amazing. And since it's a backstory, there's usually enough content which solves the pacing issue that pedes like 80% of the show. And there's some shenanigans where Sanji's like, I won't back down. And it's very nice because it shows that he really does care for the old man, and that's very sweet and stuff. Overall, Baratie is probably the best arc so far, and I give this episode in particular a 9.3. The Sanji and Jin fight episode, and as secondary fight episodes go, this one is probably one of the better ones. I'd still say Kabaji's is better though. I like his weird ball things, but a problem that I have with this and a lot of the other episodes is that we've already been power scaled above that, so I'm not really threatened by it. Like, we know Luffy can literally one-shot Buggy, so why do I care if he has balls, you know what I mean? He can literally just... And wait, some people use that argument against Don Krieg, but this is why I really hate fights where it's just a slightly worse opponent. Like, we already know you can beat that power level. Just skip ahead. I don't care. The ending with the cold-hearted demon not being able to kill Sanji, though, that was pretty nice. It's like an 8. Luffy finally fights Donald Kruger. He throws a couple punches, and then he falls over, and then he, like, gets back up. The best part of this episode is when Jin sacrifices himself to save Sanji from the bullshit gas mask that Don Krieg has for some reason. This episode's fine. It kind of has a problem with, like, all of the other ones that plagued most of Syrup Valley, where just not really that much happens, and I'm kind of bored. 8. It's, like, pretty good, but kind of badly paced. So Luffy beats up Donald Krieg for, like, the 5th time, and he finally does it. There's this very good moment with Sanji where he's, like, saving him stuff after he's, like, dying in battle. Also, Nami, who we haven't seen in, like, 17 episodes, randomly shows up at the end. She mentions Belmere, which is, I think, like, a pepper or something. I don't know. There's Jin. He does some stuff and he leaves on this comically small boat. Oh yeah, this is the first instance of Panda Man. Remember this character. He is the best character in the entire show. There's not much reason to hate it, and it sets up stuff, and it ends the arc, so like a 9. Final episode of Baratie, people. Most of this episode is establishing the fact that Sanji doesn't really want to leave, and that Zeph doesn't really want him to leave, and they have this emotional connection, and all the cooks don't really want him to leave, because they don't like him, because he's a big little family and thing. It is exceptionally nice. I mean, I'm more of a flashback kind of guy, because to me, One Piece is better when it's the emotional moments rather than the big fight scenes, because everybody has big fight scenes, but One Piece's emotional moments, top tier. This is that pinnacle example. I'm going to give it a 9.6. This is Arlong's introduction episode, and for the episodes that start seasons, which are usually pretty bad, it's pretty good. Zoro gets into some shenanigans where he gets captured by Arlong and stuff. After the crew decides that, why don't we just go directly to the big fisherman base with no prior planning? They also introduce a bunch of random side characters that will become important later, I hope. Like the mouse guy who want to fucking strangle these two people from the one village, Yosuke and what's-his-face. Though, this is also a great episode because it introduces the fact that Nami is a pirate working for Arlong. Oh yeah, and it introduces fish racism. So that's there too. 8.2. All of the main characters have finally arrived to Arlong Park. While they do, Zoro kills like 50 fishmen randomly, Usopp gets caught, then escapes at the end, I think? That or ghosts are real in the One Piece universe, so that's fun. I like the shenanigans that Luffy and Sanji and that one other guy that nobody cares about get in shenanigans with the weird cow thing. I really like Hachan for some reason. He's just exceptionally funny to me. And they don't include that piece of shit Mouse Commander. Overall, this is a solid little episode, and it shows that maybe Nami isn't just about money, which I appreciate. 8.6. We're finally introduced to Nami's backstory. And it's just pretty good. It's pretty good. They put some stuff about Bellemere, which is apparently not a pepper. Sorry about that. I also love the great misdirect where Nami's like, no, I didn't stab him. I stabbed myself. That's why she was wearing a random black glove that I didn't even notice. Not to mention they finally get rid of the 2 Zoro cronies that I don't remember the names of. Oh, and they reintroduced that dumbass whisker guy who I want to strangle and show their power because they beat up an entire Flegion, number 77 or whatever. It's a pretty solid episode that is not a backstory episode. 8.3. Okay, so I might have lied. This is actually the start of the first part of Nami's backstory. It mainly sets up Kokoyashi Village, the bond between Nami and whatever. They're really fucking poor. Then there's Jinzo, like the Yu-Gi-Oh card. I like his little hat thing. It's nice. Another strong point for emotional contention, wording am I right, is the ending where Arlong is trying to tax the shit out of the town because, he's super greedy and stuff, and he sees Bellemere, and since you already know they're poor, you're like, This episode, even though it sets up things, is still pretty good because I absolutely love flashback episodes. I'm gonna give it a solid 8.9. Nami's backstory, part 2. In this one, we basically just see the after effects. Bellemere gets shot, Arlong, 100 million berries and he'll free the village, all that shiz. It would be very fun if not for that piece of shit mouse guy who I despise, and why do they keep bringing him back? Yeah, that's about it. Also, Luffy notices the pine hat as much as I did, so that's nice. I was already kind of sympathizing with Nami, and now I like her now, so that's good. 8.4. The gang finally starts fighting Arlong. Luffy takes out like 50 people in 2 seconds. This is mostly setting up points. It's Zoro against the mini arms guy, Arlong just sitting because he's so powerful. The fishman karate guy. And my favorite, the Usopp versus random guy side story. The episode itself is pretty lackluster because it doesn't really do anything. It just sets up plot points, but it sets them up pretty well. 7.8.
Submerged. Zoro versus Hachan the octopus.
Arlong is still not doing anything, and Zoro fights the octopus. It's pretty good. Luffy's still doing nothing on the bottom of the ocean. Some good fight scenes, it's okay. I'd wager it's a solid 8.5. Fight scenes are always important in an anime, and I do actually like them. You know what I also like? Tension. Oh my fucking god, this episode has so much tension. You got the big Zorzor man going down to the water or just chilling with Arlong, doing absolutely nothing, while Sanji, he's just fighting the karate fish guy. Which is epic, by the way. Fishman karate, amazing idea. All of this is unparalleled because, of course, Luffy's at the bottom of the ocean for the 19th time, and it's amazing to see wow, they're finally gonna save him after his 7-episode hiatus. This episode is just long and kind of close to being a banger, so I'll give it an 8.8. Luffy, who had gotten stuck in a rock from some earlier plot point, finally gets out and finally starts fighting Arlong. There's also a couple thing with Zoro, he beats up the octopus a second time. The problem is fight scenes aren't really my thing. And he doesn't really do anything interesting yet. He just kind of pew 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 pew. It's alright, but definitely the weakest so far. 7.7. Luffy finally starts actually fighting with Arlong. I mean, he pulls out the teeth maneuver. That was very fun. Though it did confuse me to know that basically his entire mouth is one tooth. Regardless, there's some nice shenanigans with the big saw blade, which is a bit unnecessary, but could pop off, I guess. And they show Nami's room, which leads to a great scene in the next episode. This one, I'm starting to enjoy the fight now. I gotta admit, it does at least look pretty. I'll give it an 8.3 out of pity. Rubber apparently does beat Fish, aka Luffy beats Arlong. Let's fucking go. I don't have that much to say about this episode. Conceptually, it's pretty simple. The highlight, though, if you made me choose, would be him destroying all the other rooms and bringing down Arlong Park, metaphorically and literally tearing down Arlong's empire. That's fucking awesome. Oh yeah, and they beat up that mouse guy, which was so nice to see. Extremely solid finale to a great arc. 9.3. Oh, apparently this arc is not yet done. This is entirely just the people celebrating for the first half. I mean, yeah, 3-day festival for Arlong leaving. Seems pretty appropriate. Anyway, most of the best parts of this episode come from the second half, when it's just Nami. The moment when she gives 100 million berries to the forest, when she's talking alone in her house, and she just pops in and out of frame. That's great. And the best part is the ending when she leaves and then the pinwheel, they finally explain it. It's fucking great, dogs. I give it a 9. Luffers finally gets a bounty, let's go! This is basically just the transition episode from Arlong Park into Logue Town, and honestly, it does it pretty well. Better than that fucking Gaimon episode ever could. I really love the montage when they're introducing other people to see his bounty, like Shanks, what's his name, Zeph. It's awesome. Despite having a really simple concept, I'd say this episode is honestly pretty good. I'm going to give it a solid 8 out of 10. This episode is extremely weird. It's basically a buggy side plot. Out of all characters, they bring back fucking Gaimon. Listen, I'm not going to act like this is cinema's next masterpiece, but I honestly don't think it's that bad for incorporating Gaimon. Buggy is honestly a pretty charismatic lead on his own. And honestly, I kind of don't even really mind that this is just his chicanery episode. And they reintroduce Alvida, who got, the best weight plan ever known to man. 6.5. It's okay. Why the fuck is it taking so long to go from Arlong Park to Logue Town? This is the third filler episode in a row, followed by a fucking filler arc. I hate this show sometimes. What happens, you ask? I think Moji and Kabaji, yeah, those random guys from 3 weeks ago, they fight to become captain, and they also fight some weird-ass cannibals on an island, and then they reunite with Buggy at the end. The episode is kind of shit, honestly. It's just kind of boring. I guess the fight scene was alright, though. 5.5 out of pity. We finally start Logue Town. Oh my god. And it's pretty fun. They set up some great tension with Smoker. Not to mention they show he's a good Marine. With the similar parallel to Helmeppo, where he's when a little girl smashes on him, he's nah, you got that. It's okay. That's pretty sweet. The part where he also is the One Piece, and they set up his backstory with the old bar and stuff. That part's great. Good episode that tries to set up too much. 7.8. This is the Zoro sword episode. 2 big things happen. Luffy, he meets Smoker finally, and they set up that stuff for later. And Zoro has a little subplot where he meets a Kuina ripoff and gets a couple of new swords. Sorry, y'all, I got hiccups. I would say this episode is pretty good. Honestly, a solid 8.3. Usopp's just fucking around and gets into a duel. It's against this apparently really famous sharpshooter guy called Daddy-O5 or something. The entire episode basically just focuses on his shenanigans beforehand, which is just getting a bunch of random gadgets and such, and then fighting Daddy-O5 in a duel, where he's oh, I am a good sharpshooter, because Daddy-O5 is a connection to Yasopp, I guess. I know that sounds interesting on paper, but I honestly just don't give a shit. I feel they could have, made a Tales of Ba Sing Se-esque thing for Logue Town, but this is just not it. This is way too long. 7.5. Yet another side quest episode. Sanji decides that he's going to enter in a cooking competition to fight, I think her name is Carmen. They apparently have some history, but who gives a shit? Her, like, egg commander is funny, I guess. I don't know, you see, my problem is that the only one that has had any sort of effective weight for me has been the Zoro one. Have just kind of been bad. We'll give it like a 7. Okay, shit's finally starting to hit the fan. Buggy is in the middle of the town square, Luffy is captured, and he's about to kill him, and then boom, act of God, basically. It is a bit of a cop-out ending in the most literal sense, but Luffy literally goes right back to the place where he was about to die, so you know, who cares? They've got some very good action scenes, and they finally start to set up Smoker as the villain that he should be. Not to mention, I'm starting to unironically enjoy Buggy and Alvida teaming up as a teammate. They're building some great suspense, and I'm here for it, because I think the next episode is actually the finale of this arc. I'm gonna give it an 8.1. We are finally done with Logtown and Smoker's shenanigans. I have incredibly mixed feelings on this arc. For one, Luffy and all of the other earlier villains teaming up on Luffy and then kill him on an execution platform for Goldie Roger is an absolutely amazing concept. But at the same time, like 60% of this arc is filler, and it is then immediately followed up by the filler arc. Which, by the way, now that we're done with Logtown, I'm not skipping the filler. I'm gonna watch every One Piece episode. So if I complain and whine and yell for the next 8 parts of this series, just know why. Best of the arc. I'm gonna give it an 8.8. We are introduced to Warship Island, and I don't know if I'm speaking crazy talk or not, but I know this is filler, and honestly, I kinda like it. At least the idea of a girl getting stranded by the Marines and then being chased by this fat Chungus is more interesting than, like, Romance Dawn. Don't at me. The plot, you ask? Well, it's not much. They're just setting things up. Basically, all you gotta know is that there's a girl who got captured by the Marines because she knows something about a person named Rio, and then the pirates save her, and then she's like, and there's an evil Marine who's like, get the fuck back. I will award this introduction a 7.7. Kinda hate this episode, not gonna lie. Luffy and the gang just go back to Warship Island and meet an old guy. And I don't know if it's because they haven't established it yet, but I was kind of hoping the dragons would be more hype. I'm also not really confident in a filler's ability to tell a competent story. For now, though, I'll give it the benefit of the doubt. This episode particularly, the entire plot feels shoved into the last, 8 minutes. Gets a 4. Very little of note happens here. Basically, the Straw Hats and the gang, they just go away from the purple shithead guy. They make this honestly pretty cool looking boat, and then they split up, half of them goes away, and the other gang has to stall the Marines and shit. It honestly has pretty good pacing. My biggest problem, however, is the main villain, who is the purple head shit guy. He's only really intimidating throughout, the second part of the arc, and even then, he's, kinda bad. He's wavering somewhere in between Alvida and Don Krieg levels of competence. Still, best of the arc. Maybe Warship Island isn't so bad. I'll give it an 8. The gang enters Dragon Purgatory. At least I like to imagine that they can't escape this wall and they're just trapped there. Anyway, Loof finally makes it to the island where the dragons are supposed to be. They get chased by the purple shithead, and after supposedly finding the secret island, which is the village hidden by the dragons, they realize, oh, wait, no it's not. And then they all fucking fall into a hole. At least I think that's what happens. I really stopped paying attention after 5 minutes. 7.1. This episode is a little silly, I must admit. The gang realizes that the mural that they were trying to find to save the dragon was fake, so they had to go back to the island now. That makes absolutely no sense. My brain started melting the second I started watching this episode. Basically, just know that they get surrounded by the Big Chungus. That the rest of the arc is gonna be them fighting Big Chungus and then leaving and freeing all the dragons or whatever. 6.4. It was okay. Luffy gets surrounded by the fleet of Big Chungus. I honestly appreciate that they're finally doing something with this character. I was treating him as a background character and treating the purple shithead guy as the main villain from this point. But I'd say he's decent here, probably around Don Krieg level. It's also just quite fun to see how many ordinary people the Straw Hats can take on by this point. And our dragon buddy finally flies. He looks a bit too much like a bird for my taste, but maybe that's just me. I actually really like this episode. Go figure. 8.3. They pulled a fast one on us, y'all. It turns out that Warship Island is the Lost Island. What? More importantly, though, the bird dragon guy dies. And honestly, it's pretty touching to see, as well as Luffy absolutely destroying Chungus with the help of all of the other dragons, of course. Very cathartic episode, if that makes sense. And they actually had the balls to kill off Grandpa Rio, which I was not expecting. and props, I guess. I will give it an 8.5. Finale to the East Blue. Took some sweat and tears, but we're here. In this episode, they finally kill both of the purple shithead guy and the Chungus. They have this honestly pretty touching scene with all the dragons. And we say goodbye to the East Blue. The episode ends with them finally going to Reverse Mountain and into the Grand Line. It's an oddly somber episode and pretty emotionally impactful. The East Blue may have had its ups and downs. Game on! But overall, I'm going to give this episode an 8.8 and the East Blue arc an 8.5.
Subscribe for Alabasta.